Hi, you guys. A lot of times on YouTube, I hear people making vids, and they're giving out scientific processes and stuff that are just not in my specific area of knowledge. So, they'll be telling me something about, I don't know, biology, and I'll be on the other side of the screen going, I can't fucking find this shit. What? Wait, what? Wait, the precursor to the. Huh? So when a subject comes up that I actually can give some expert information on, um, I want to say something. And this is all coming about because I was watching a clip on foxnews.com, which I don't recommend, by the way, and they were talking about Japan's nuclear reactors and what the crap is going on with them. And I was very interested in what was going on with them, too. But for some reason, the anchor was from the business side, and she was not an engineer or anybody who knew dick shit about nuclear reactors. So yeah, she was making a bunch of stuff up, and I basically face palmed. And so I'm gonna bring you guys up on some knowledge here because I can. All right. So first, let's figure out how a nuclear reactor works. This is a very crude drawing I did of a nuclear reactor system. Okay. Now, in red, this is what is called the primary loop. You have heat produced in the reactor, okay, and that heat is picked up by coolant, which is just water in this particular style of reactor, flows to this thing here, which is called a steam generator, and transfers the heat of that coolant to another medium, which happens to also be water, and then gets pumped right back into the reactor vessel. So it stays a liquid throughout the entire cycle, but very hot liquid, okay? So this hot liquid heats water in the steam generator, and takes that liquid water that's in there and turns it into steam. That steam then gets piped down to a turbine, which is hooked up to a generator, so that when the steam pushes the turbine, it turns the rotors on the generator and it makes electricity. After it gets exhausted out of the turbine, it goes into a condenser where it is cooled and condensed back into a liquid that is then pumped back into the steam generator. This is called the secondary side, okay? Primary, secondary. No mixing of any of these two liquids. Got it? So, and all of this, by the way, is held in a very strong containment dome. So that's how that works. What happened in Japan is they lost power and they lost their emergency backups. Typically, you have a backup to the backup, and sometimes a backup to the backup to the backup. But they lost their emergency diesel generators and they lost their emergency battery power, so they had no electricity, okay, to run the circulating pump. So all of that water is just sitting in there, and it's continuing to get hotter and hotter and hotter. Even if you shut the reactor down, okay, it's not like a car engine. You just turn the key and bleh, it dies. No, it continues to produce heat. In the same way that if you're cooking with a really hot pan, even though you take it off the stove, it doesn't make the pan not hot anymore. It's got to cool down. But since that water is just sitting in there, stagnant, it just gets hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter, and that is a really bad thing. You don't want that to happen. Because when that does happen, then it'll get hot enough to where it starts boiling, and that's where you reach danger zone. You don't ever want any boiling going on in there. Because once you start boiling the water off, the water goes away. And the number one rule in running a nuclear reactor is keep the core covered. You do that at all costs. Keep the core covered. Okay? So, I know they're talking about partial meltdowns and stuff like that. So, what's a meltdown? Well, a meltdown is when the temperature of the fuel rods gets hot enough that the actual coating on the rods, or the fuel element, whatever you want to call it, melts. And so the actual uranium that's inside the fuel comes out, which is bad because you don't want it going anywhere. And if it's not contained within, it's free to move about. And so a meltdown is when that melts. A partial meltdown is when you think, certain little areas of the rods, or their fuel matrix is melted. A full meltdown is when it all melts and becomes this kind of like giant globular hot stuff that will eventually get hot enough to melt its way through the bottom of the reactor vessel. Very bad. And I know you guys have probably heard about Chernobyl and that stuff. Let me just tell you for the record right now, because a lot of people don't know this. Nuclear reactors don't blow up. They don't. They're not bombs. Okay? And I know you've heard about Chernobyl and like, well, Chernobyl blew up. No, it didn't. Not like a bomb, anyway. So, what was I thinking? So, Chernobyl. Why did Chernobyl blow up? Well, it didn't. See, what happened in Chernobyl is that the core got so hot that it caused massive boiling in the core. Remember how I said that was bad? Massive boiling of all this water is going to create a lot of steam, because that's what water does. When it gets hot, it wants to make a phase change and become a gas. Steam. Problem is that steam takes up a lot more volume than water. And if you have nowhere for that steam to go, it's just going to increase the amount of pressure felt on the reactor vessel. And the pressure will just keep going up until it finds a weak enough spot, and that's what happened at Chernobyl. It's not like the, uranium blew up like a bomb, or a grenade or anything like that. It was the water expanding so rapidly that it burst open. Like if you ever put dry ice in a soda bottle with some water in there, and you close the cap, you shake it up, you throw it, it'll boom, pressure. That's what happens. That's how they can blow up. But the containment domes are designed to keep that in there. And there's lots of other things you can do to keep it from doing that, like venting steam off. Okay, that's what they're currently doing, is they're venting steam off, and they're getting new water in there that'll just boil off, and then they'll vent that steam, and so on and so forth. So, all right. Things that should make you feel concerned, which is why I've been reading up on this or looking up all this stuff that's happening in Japan. When you start hearing things like they're using seawater, they are pumping in boron, that's real bad sign, because I'm well versed in the emergency procedures of a nuclear reactor, and let me tell you, those sorts of things are like the last line of defense thing. They're pumping in seawater because they can't get the coolant flowing, so they're trying to get any water. It could be sewer water. They don't care. As long as you keep the core covered. Remember that? And they're introducing things like boron, which is there to absorb neutrons, which will hopefully slow down the nuclear reaction that's going on, the fission. Because that's what causes fission is a neutron interacts with uranium and makes it unstable, and it's so unstable it breaks apart and you get heat in the process. Really, it's kind of simple. So yeah, bad things are happening. I hope they can get it back under control. You may hear things in the news about radiation and contamination and exposure limits and all this stuff. First off, everybody on this planet gets exposed to radiation every day. It's what's known as background radiation. And if you go like suntanning on the beach, you're getting even more radiation exposure. It's coming from the sun, but that would be more than if you, say, I don't know, stayed inside. So everybody gets irradiated, and it's okay to get a little bit of radiation. It's really not going to do that much to you. But in large quantities or different types of radiation, that can be a serious thing. Reactors put off 4 types of radiation. You've got gamma radiation in the form of photons. You've got neutron radiation. You've got beta radiation, and you've got alpha radiation. Gamma radiation is the same stuff like when you get an X-ray. You know, you go to the dentist and they take a picture of your teeth or whatever. That's gamma radiation. You can handle a good dose of that stuff every now and again. Neutron radiation is very hazardous to your cells because it's little neutrons flying around, and they have mass where a photon doesn't have mass. Well, very little mass anyway. And so it's like being shot with little tiny bullets. Very bad for your cells. You got beta radiation. That one's not too bad on you. Your body pretty much protects itself from that stuff. And then you got alpha radiation, which is a helium atom with no electrons. Okay, so it's got 2 neutrons, 2 protons, but it's just a free radical floating around. It's basically like neutron radiation, only beefed up. But it's charged, so it should be stopped by your clothing and stuff like that. As long as you don't swallow it, it gets, you know, on your insides, you'll be fine. So that's what radiation is. Contamination is a different term that's used. Contamination is particulates, like actual pieces of fuel, basically, that has gotten onto you. Okay. A good relation between contamination and radiation is that if you step into dog shit, the dog shit on your boot, that's contamination. The smell is radiation. Okay? So if you happen to watch where you're stepping and don't step in the dog shit, but you smell it, you know, that's the same as getting a radiation dose but not getting contaminated. Okay? Contamination is when it gets on you. And when it's on you, it's obviously going to put out some radiation, and that's why it's bad to be contaminated, because you're just constantly getting irradiated, and you can't get away from the irradiated source. And that's what they're trying to prevent and keep from happening, is getting contamination loose. Radiation gets loose, you can get away from the radiation. You know, you can shield yourself from radiation. If the contamination gets out, it's going to irradiate whatever it touches. And so if it gets in the air and it gets blown around or something, it could be real bad. So that's contamination. I figured I'd give you guys a quick little, I guess the video wasn't quick. Anyways, I got a chance to use my expertise to explain something in simple terms to you guys. Most of you probably don't care because this isn't a video about atheism, but, you know, I thought it was interesting. Thanks for watching.